Hello, and welcome. My name is Kemi King. I'm a theater practitioner and student here in Kingston. My work surrounds the way in which art can help shape social consciousness. This season, in addition to the Grand OnStage programming, I'm hosting artist conversations. Today we're here with Roshanak Jaberi, artistic director of Jaberi Dance Theater. Roshanak is a multidisciplinary artist based in Toronto, Dora nominated choreographer and performer, ISPA Global Fellow, and the recipient of the Chalmers Arts Fellowship. The Grand OnStage was originally scheduled to present Jaberi's dance performance of No Woman's Land on International Women's Day in March 8th, 2021, but unfortunately that had to be postponed due to COVID-19. And we look forward to presenting No Woman's Land on our stage when we are once able to gather together for live performances. For now, we are so happy to have the Augmented Reality photo exhibit, an outdoor photo installation that will be unveiled April 6, 2021, for the public to experience outside of the Grand Theater main entrance. So thank you again for being here, Roshanak. Can you just tell me a little bit about yourself? What is the thing that sparked your passion for the arts?
Thank you, Kemi, for this conversation. Happy to be here to talk about my work and the upcoming photo exhibit that you mentioned. So I am an Iranian-born Canadian artist. I'm a first-generation refugee. My family came here in the 1980s. We were displaced because of the war in Iran. And since then, I've been a practicing artist in Toronto. I come from a family of artists and entrepreneurs. And so I've always been, like, storytelling has always been a part of my, my family. And so, I think the last few years is when I really started to work a little bit more focused and closely at the intersection of art and social justice. Mm-hmm. And that's really, that's been sort of shaping the way that I approach my art and the projects that I aim to create.
Yeah, thank you. So as an interdisciplinary artist, performance artist is a title that you also bear, and I personally am trying to identify with that as well. And I want to know, like, what that title means to you.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, we use interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary interchangeably. That's a tongue twister right there. But I think that in the arts, we're so used to that terminology, but for the general public, sometimes I get questions around, what does that actually mean for you? So, as a multidisciplinary artist, I would say, I work with different forms, but dance and theater is my sort of primary medium that I focus on. But I sort of define myself more of an artist that has an interdisciplinary approach. In that I wouldn't say like I'm a professional filmmaker, for example, or a professional actor, but I really love and integrate different forms like film and theater in my work.
Yeah.
And so I usually I've always been a curious person and I follow my curiosity. So, whatever the project that I'm exploring, whatever that project or that story needs, whatever that narrative needs, I allow myself to experiment with different forms to be able to put the storytelling at the forefront. And sometimes that means that I create a work that's not just dance-based and movement is a part of it, but I experiment with other forms as well.
That's so interesting. I think that that's such a great way of like thinking and creating, because I feel like the different art forms just have so much to inform and to like speak to one another. That's such a, yeah, thank you for sharing. I know that for No Woman's Land, you worked with academics and like with academia on the research and development for the piece. I'm just wondering how academic was able to coincide with your art practice. I know there's a bit of stigma that you're either an artist or an academic, and I'm just wondering how you were able to hold the two of those.
Yeah, I mean, why can't we be both, really? I think one of the things that I'm learning and I'm really enjoying is and it sort of goes back to your previous question about interdisciplinary work, is that to be like I know this word is also very overused, holistic, but to be able to have multiple perspectives and approaches to art making is really important to me. And just because of the type of content that I explore, the issues that I explore that I'm passionate about, a lot of them are complex social political issues. And so for me, it's really important to be able to research what I'm addressing through my art. And in order for me to sort of do the stories justice and to be responsible in the storytelling and make sure that I'm using an ethical process both in the story collection and the way that I represent the stories on stage, is really vital for me to do research. And so, you know, I would say that research is more as a central focus versus academia alone. So I think academia is a part of my research, only because sometimes I rely on sort of experts who happen to be activists or academics to help support or guide my research. So they are really good at contextualizing the questions that I have when I'm doing my research. And so a lot of times I might watch films or documentaries, I might source photographs, I would look at articles and read books. And so I really take sort of like different approaches to my research. And one of the most important ones is whenever it's possible, I like to interview people that are from the communities or have lived experience, you know, for the stories that I want to portray on stage. That's not always possible, but when it is, I definitely, that's sort of central to my work.
Yeah, like even on your website, there is the infographic that talks about like the refugee camps and populations. Yeah, could you talk a little bit about the way like your work intersects with social justice and education? Do you often have like workshops or like informal pamphlets that go with along with the pieces?
Yeah, I think as an artist, I'm always sort of questioning my role in community and community movements, social justice movements, and how I'm also contributing, not just benefiting from communities. And so as I question that in my work all the time, one of the things that I found has been helpful for me is to contextualize the work for the audience that comes to see it. Not everybody has done the years of research about the topic that I'm addressing through my art. And oftentimes, especially the form of dance and theater, it can be a little bit abstract. I think contextualizing the stories into the bigger sort of context is really important for me and for my audiences. But also in terms of, whenever possible, I like to have like a call to action or some sort of some additional step that I can make available to people that view my work, because sometimes when they come see the work, they might be moved by what they're experiencing, what they're seeing. And I really, I don't want to leave them sort of hanging to be like, okay, well, what do I do with that information now? So when it's possible, I like to provide additional resources so people can go and investigate on their own, and they can continue to learn and continue to participate or get involved in whatever it is that, you know, the topic of that particular production is.
What are some like call to actions that you've had like with your previous work?
It really depends. Sometimes it could be there's a particular project that requires sort of signatures for a petition. Sometimes there's a particular initiative like a settlement of a, you know, like using the refugee piece that I was working on, No Woman's Land. Sometimes there might be a particular family that's settling into Canada and they might need resources or volunteer support, or so it really depends on what the community needs at the time. I sort of then that's part of the reason I love to work with activists and academics and really like frontline workers who are working day in and day out in these different communities, tackling all these different issues. So I lean on their expertise a little bit to tell me, okay, this is what the community needs. And I certainly not attempting with my artistic work to go in there and try to, you know, like solve problems,
Yeah.
but if I can sort of provoke a little bit of thought or empathy or emotion through the artistic work that I'm doing, and people are then sort of like motivated to contribute and take action and get involved, then that's a great thing. And so it really changes depending on what the project is.
Yeah, yes, thank you. That's really good. Um, yeah. So I haven't been able to see No Man's Land, but I have seen the trailer on your website, and it looks so beautiful. It looks so like I am ready to see it. And there's this kind of like, I'm calling it a cage because I'm not really sure what exactly it is. Um, but I'm so interested in the way that it gets used, and it seems like it kind of like evolves and like gets used as different things. Could you tell me a little bit about like the different uses or like transformations of the object, and maybe even what the object is?
Yeah, I mean, and it sort of developed partly because I had this idea of I wanted to really make sure that the production, I knew I wanted to use a set,
Mm.
and I knew there was themes that I wanted to explore and images I wanted to create. But then, of course, you start, as you know, as an artist, you start with these big ideas, and then you have to sort of get a little bit realistic with it as the work develops. So I started to think, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to have multiple set pieces. It'll be difficult to work with. And also, I really was going for a sort of a minimalistic aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
So it started with creating a boat structure. And we created this frame that in my mind, I was intending to develop further, but then we started experimenting with this set piece, which became sort of the skeleton. And we thought this is actually interesting to keep it as the skeleton, as opposed to further developing it into an actual boat, because that also allowed us to transform it throughout the piece and make different uses out of it. So sometimes in certain scenes, it is a boat, which depicts the pre-migration by sea of refugees. And sometimes it transforms into a tent or a tunnel. Sometimes it transforms into, as you mentioned, like a cage or prison, which sometimes, as you know, we've been seeing and the images and media with checkpoints or border crossings. Sometimes their refugees are detained. And so, and this really all came out of the interviews that I was conducting with survivors and the research I was doing. So I thought, you know, why don't we try to experiment with this one piece and see what we can do with it? And so it just happened that it sort of started to transform every time we played around with it and experimented with it. And so the set piece actually kind of became a character in itself. It became a character in the whole piece, and it continued to transform. And I liked that it created all these surprises. It became a little bit unpredictable, and so I know I enjoyed that, and that was sort of one of the feedbacks I got as well.
Yeah. Question about the unpredictability. I know that sometimes when like you're creating and something just happens, you're like like it wasn't something that you were necessarily like thinking into. Is there a moment with the cage that happened during rehearsal that what kind of like came up as like a surprise for you, and you're like, this is like a really cool like way to utilize this? Or
So many. I mean, if I had to be honest with you, I have hours and hours of footage of improvisations and experimentations over the 3 years that the project was developing.
Yeah.
So much of it didn't make it into the final production because ultimately you reach a point where you can't be so attached to your ideas, and sort of you have to think about, is this serving the piece, or am I just attached to it because I like it? So, you know, when you start to sort of chop things out and edit your work and really sort of hone in on what it is that you want to say, so much doesn't make it into the final piece. But I have it there, and sometimes I think, you know, maybe that material will serve as a different project. It might be a trilogy of some sort, who knows? But there were a lot of surprises, a lot of really interesting things that came out of the experimentation. And that's sort of the beautiful thing about doing research is I spent a lot of time with my team just sort of sharing my research and having discussions. So when the artist got into that creative studio space and we were experimenting on our feet, all these really interesting things started to come out because they had already embodied all that material, all that information. And so that gave us freedom to really improvise and play around.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to switch gears and talk about the augmented reality exhibit a little bit. Can you tell me a bit about how this particular piece came about?
Yeah, well, the No Woman's Land production was supposed to tour in 2021. And because of the pandemic, we had to postpone it to 2022. So during this time, I was speaking to some of the presenters and we were talking about other sort of ways to engage the communities or the audiences leading up to the performance in 2022. And I was originally interested in sort of continuing my research with refugee women. And so the original idea was that I would revisit and reconnect with some of those women whom I interviewed and capture their portraits and have them retell aspects of their story. So we would hear it from their own words, retelling their parts of their journey. But because Toronto went right into back-to-back lockdowns, I wasn't able to, it became impossible to connect with people and interview them. So what I ended up doing, I had to reimagine the idea and I focused on one woman's story and I created a series out of her journey. And so that's what the exhibit will be. There are portraits of a series of portraits of her. And the augmented reality portion of it is that audiences will get, or the public will get a chance to view the portraits and using their tablets, they can sort of point it to the images and they can hear and see her retelling her story.
Ooh, sounds really cool. Yeah. Could you tell me, like, is there a favorite like image that you've captured? Like, I guess the image along with the story as well.
Yeah, she has a very, so the person I was interviewing, her name is Anna, and she was a refugee from El Salvador. She was displaced because of the war there. And basically this whole series, which is the exhibit, but also a short documentary, is about her journey of trying to find her mother. So during the war, her mother was captured and kidnapped. And so she has been searching for her remains ever since, searching for justice to hold accountable the people who were responsible. And so this piece basically captures her story from some memories of childhood, memories of her mother, and the events themselves. And then of course her journey after that incident in terms of seeking justice for her and coming to Canada to seek asylum and so on. So to answer your question in terms of the images, Anna has certain pieces that belong to her mother. And this is sort of, because they haven't been able to recover her body or find her body, really this is all she has left of her, in addition to her memories, of course, but she has certain pieces that are very sentimental. And so we use that in the images, we use some of those pieces in the images. So for me, that was very profound, and I hope that it will resonate with the public when they're viewing it as well.
Yeah. I'm wondering, I know like you don't have to answer, but has Anna also like seen the exhibit, and has she like been able to like witness that herself?
Well, the work is still in the final stages of completion, but and just in terms of my process, because obviously it is her story, it's her journey, it's very important to me that she feels comfortable with the way that their story is being presented, the way she's being represented. So there's been a lot of sort of collaboration and back and forth and consultation with her from the beginning, before we even got together to film anything. And throughout as well. And definitely when the piece is completed, I will share it with her first, and just to see if there's any changes that need to be to be done before it's sort of released to the public.
Yeah.
So I am also curious to see, you know,
Like,
what her reaction will be.
Thank you. I have a question about like image composition and how yeah, just how like you've decided to put the images together, but you kind of like talked into the about like having that back and forth with like Anna, but yeah, could you talk to me a little bit about image composition and how like you've decided what images that you're going to take? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not a professional photographer or filmmaker. So I worked with this fabulous woman. Her name is Danielle De Silva, and she has an organization called Photographers Without Borders. So she has her mission, and her approach is very much in alignment with the way that I work. And so I was, you know, researching and trying to find the right collaborator for this project. And so what we did is basically I had certain ideas and certain sort of visual ideas around what I wanted to capture. But when we all of us got together, there was also a lot of improvisation that happened. So things kind of developed organically as well. Some things I had an idea of what I wanted. Other things, as Anna was telling her story, certain images sort of emerged from the retelling or the recount of her testimony. And so, and we sort of went with it and we improvised, and things developed organically. So there were these surprises and things that just happened in the moment, and we captured it. And so it was a really beautiful collaboration between the three of us.
Yeah. Would you be able to talk into the like the augmented reality part of it? I'm really interested in like the iPad and like moving like kind of like moving through the story. How did that idea come about?
Well, I mean, like most dance artists right now, you know, because of the pandemic, the first thing I think our industry is probably one of the last to resume fully to whatever normal is, just because dance, of course, is reliant on touch and connection and proximity. So basically, in terms of like the way that this project came about, as I was experimenting and investigating different digital forms and what things I can experiment with during this time that will resonate with the way that I enjoy working. And so I sort of came across augmented reality, although that technology has been around for a long time. It's not something that I've experimented with before. And so there's been a lot of advancements with that tool. And so the way that it works, basically, there's you can hold your smartphone or your tablet to an image, and that image, the way that it's constructed in advance is that it's associated with video footage or graphics or animation, whatever the artist chooses to do. And so when the person holds their tablet against the image, they get to hear and see that image come to life with the footage that was associated with that image, if that makes sense. So in this case, we filmed Anna and in her interviews, and also the environment where we were filming. And so we created like series of images and a series of footage, and I put it together basically, or I'm in the process of putting them together. So each image will have an accompanying audio and footage associated with it. So it's very easy. It's a very easy way to, an accessible way to experience the art, I should say.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you. I think about what you said about what was the word that you used? Proximity with like with dance, and then kind of like bringing that into this particular exhibit, and how it's like I feel like when like to bring it onto somebody's phone and to kind of like have that like almost closer and like more personal interaction with it, I think is really cool. Yeah, and might be a way for people to feel the story a little bit more. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I mean, that's a really good point that you make, in that just during this period of disconnection, it's really a great way to be able to build a little bit of closeness and intimacy, even though it's really the public or that person experiencing it intimately with the art itself, and not necessarily with other people. But there's an interesting way of building that connection.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for like speaking with me and like sharing. Thank you so much for being here. And this is the end of our interview. So for those who are watching at home, be on the lookout for the Augmented Reality photo exhibit going up April 6th, 2021, outside of the Grand Theater main entrance. Thank you once again. Ending these are always so awkward.
It is. Thank you, Kemi. I really appreciate it, and it's been nice to have this conversation with a fellow artist. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.